Hey, toy collectors, welcome back to Spector Creative, and if you're like me, well, you believe Oreos are part of a well-balanced breakfast, but if you're also like me, you collect Star Wars toys, and we've had Star Wars toys for decades now, in different sizes, different scales, different amounts of articulation, and some Star Wars scales are a surefire hit. Some break the rules, some follow the rules. Others are more or less dead on arrival. And while lots of companies are looking to license Star Wars, especially as new categories open up, there is a very distinctive way to understand whether or not a toy is going to be successful or not. Whether or not you're going to see a long run of these toys for years with a huge amount of character selection, or if it's kind of a one and done. In fact, there's actually a formula, and when you follow the Star Wars toy formula, you more or less have a surefire hit. And if you deviate from this formula, well, you're probably looking at clearance fodder. Recently, and it's 2022 in August when I'm recording this, we've had quite a few new toys pop up in the aisle under the Star Wars license, and some of them are going to be surefire hits, and some of them maybe not so much. And again, this all comes down to play patterns and the way kids engage with the Star Wars brand. Now, by far, the best-selling Star Wars scale toy line for the last 30, 40 years has been the 3 3/4 scale. We see this with different action features, different gimmicks, or just a lot of articulation on vintage cards. There's many ways to sell a Star Wars 3 3/4 figure, but looking back at the original Kenner days in the late 70s, early 80s, it wasn't about the action figures. It was actually about the vehicles. Kenner executives thought the vehicles, much like in Jurassic Park, the dinosaurs, were going to be the runaway hit. All of the people running around, well, they were just fodder to either, well, for Jurassic Park, have the dinosaurs eat, or for Star Wars, put inside the vehicles. This is why you saw so many of the Kenner figures as vehicle drivers, or pilots, if you will. There was a huge abundance, overabundance even, of figures that were designed specifically to pilot vehicles. As we got to the modern Star Wars line, the Power of the Force 2, you even saw lots of figure plus vehicle combinations. So let's look back, because you can see immediately if a Star Wars toy line is going to be a hit or not, based on whether or not it accomplishes this. Alright, so the first Star Wars spin-off line was the Micro Collection. This was the first time Star Wars toys were offered at a different scale, and specifically, as the name implies, a micro scale. The line was based on play sets with metal, non-articulated figures that could be placed on the set for display, for what's called open-ended play, which is like dollhouse play, meaning you're going through the day or the life of a character and what they might do. And with Star Wars, what they might do is obviously battle or shoot or lightsaber, etc. In fact, fun little fact, this micro line from Kenner, because I had a few of my figures from when I was a kid, was the inspiration for Jada's nano metal line. When I worked at Jada, I helped put this line together, and it was directly influenced, literally by me bringing some of the Kenner micro figures in and dumping them on the president's desk and saying, we should do this. Alright, anyway, that's a video for a different time. It'll be linked at the end. Let's take a look back still at this micro collection, because it's, while very strong with the figures, and very strong with the play sets, there was a key part of Star Wars that was missing from the micro line, and if you haven't guessed what that is by now, well, how do you think all of these characters got to the different play sets? They don't just appear there, right? You have to actually travel. And while there were some play sets offered in the micro collection, they were minimal, and even the vehicles were a bit more playset-like, versus being a traditional put the figure in the cockpit and fly it around. Especially with all the metal parts, it made it a little dangerous. So, without vehicles, and with figure and playset only play patterns, the micro line didn't really last. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have something like the Micro Machines line, first from Galoob and later by Hasbro, which was more or less completely a vehicle line. Yes, there were some playsets and there were some minifigures, but the minifigures didn't interact with the vehicles. I mean, outside of Luke's land speeder, you really didn't have figurines on the vehicle. Oh, I guess the speeder bikes too. But yeah, other than getting original Ralph McQuarrie art on the packaging, yes, that's amazing and not talked about enough, this line was really known as just vehicle play. The minifigures that came with them, while they were fun and they were very reminiscent of the micro line from Kenner, you couldn't take Han and put him inside of the Millennium Falcon. He couldn't control it, and therefore the child can't control it. It's putting the cockpit and the pilot together that creates the magic of Star Wars and why it works so well for toys. When you only have one of these things, meaning just figures or just vehicles, and we'll talk about the Black Series, don't worry, well, that's sometimes how you know whether a line is going to be successful. The Micro Machines Star Wars action fleet, which took the success of the basic Micro Machine line, but now added figure play by making the vehicles just slightly bigger, big enough that you could have opening cockpits and enable you to put the minifigures that had at least some articulation, usually it was just waist movement, but the ability to take those figures and actually place them inside of the vehicle to control the vehicle, therefore the child is controlling the vehicle through the imaginary pilot, if you will. Well, that is the play pattern. That's the key to Star Wars success. When you can do that, no matter what source you're taking the ship from, whether it's the prequels, the Disney era, or, well, the classic movies that I love so much, that's your hit. You can even see that inset shot showing the child exactly what to do. Place the pilot inside. Now, Hasbro, actually no, I'm sorry, this would have been Galoob, was able to release sets that had more figurines, but more or less they usually come to the smaller vehicle as well. And while you could get different scales and different sizes that would help them be in scale to each other, the key play pattern remained. And that's why the action fleet did so well. If you look at lines that are entirely figure-based and usually with limited articulation or are designed really for display rather than play, this Epic Forces line allowed you to rotate the figure inside of the package, not even ever having to remove it. But what child wants that? I mean, you've got basically a toy you can't even touch. I mean, yes, you could take it out of the package. Or these the Hyper Real figures that Hasbro put out a few years ago that had no external articulation, no pins, no joints. It was all done internally with what's called a skeleton structure. But they never got past 2 figures because it's a figure-based only line. Or another example is Unleashed. This was a line that was taking Star Wars characters and, I guess if you will, taking them to the extreme. I actually really liked this line. It had some of my favorite characters doing really cool, I guess, slightly off-camera things, taking aspiration for what could have happened, like Boba Fett blasting his way out of the Sarlacc. And that should have happened in Book of Boba Fett, by the way. We should have seen that, not just a slow climb out of the dirt. But that's not important right now. The point is, even with some of the most popular characters from the franchise, when they're reduced to non-articulated pre-posed statues, well, it's no different than when you have figures in small pre-posed statues. If a Star Wars line doesn't include the ability to take a figure and place it in the cockpit, well, if you're just recreating another toy's play pattern, i.e. army soldiers, and just slapping the Star Wars concept on top of that, sure, there were vehicles, but again, you can't place a character inside that vehicle. So looking at some of the new Star Wars product on shelf, one of the things you can see from Mattel are those cuddly little Wookiee and Ewok babies. Well, yeah, just because Baby Yoda is really popular doesn't mean that nurturing play is part of Star Wars. Nurturing play is a very distinct play pattern. One of the most, I suppose, groundbreaking toys in this was the My Buddy from the 80s. What's on the shelf now that I think is going to be a huge success is the Micro Galaxy Squadron line that Jazzwares is putting out. Because, well, it's more or less essentially the Galoob action fleet recreated. You're taking slightly articulated figures, a ship that can accommodate that, and placing the pilot inside. It's basically the action fleet. Much like the mission fleet that Hasbro is doing. It's the same concept. You have small figures, basic articulation, and the ability to place them inside of the cockpit. This is the key right here. If you see a new Star Wars toy line on shelf, ask yourself, can a child place the figure inside of a ship? If the answer is yes, you're looking at a hit. If the answer is no, well, not so much. I mean, yes, again, things like the Black Series survive on figures alone. Those vehicles are a little too big to be able to do this, to be able to place a figure inside the cockpit. And it's one of the few lines that's able to survive on characters only, mostly because it's in scale to all other 6-inch figure lines. But for a child, where the bread and butter of all toy sales are, you have to have that ability. That's what makes Star Wars so playable. That's why you see so many figure and vehicle combinations. And while 3 3/4 used to be the gold standard for doing a vehicle-figure combination, the reason this has sort of moved on is price point. You used to be able to buy a figure and a vehicle for, say, $40, $50, right? I mean, you got Wedge, you got his droid, you got an X-Wing, you even got a ladder. Well, fast forward today, and the exact same product is more than double in price. And that's why 3 3/4 is struggling, because it's too expensive to produce the figure-vehicle combo. You don't see many vehicles for vintage collection anymore outside of HasLab. And when you try to take Star Wars and force-fit it into another play pattern for a different toy, and whether that's things like old-school army men or just pre-posed statues, even of extremely popular characters, you're off formula, which is why these lines don't go that deep and don't last that long. You're either in or you're out. I hope this video clarified what makes a successful Star Wars toy and how to tell if the new line you're collecting is going to last for years or just a season. If you like this video, the best way to support the channel is to please share it with others. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.